Hello everyone and welcome on the BluGuitar YouTube channel. It's Emmanuel here today, and yeah, it's a premiere of a couple of things. So we've been doing this metal live stream for a couple of times now over the past few months, and yeah, we've been enjoying it, having a good time to show people, especially what the Black amp, the original edition, can do. So we thought we'd give it a no name, which happened to be Academy of Shred. So welcome to the first Academy of Shred episode ever. I'm super excited to be doing this with you guys, and yeah, second premiere is this new place. So if you've tuned into the other live streams as well, you've seen that I've been in another place, but I've moved places. I built my own studio, so from the walls to the ceiling, everything is brand new and was designed by me over the past couple of months. So it's just a super exciting day. Anyway, let's start playing a little bit guitar, shouldn't we? So let me play a couple of notes before we'll deep dive into the world of 7-string and low-tuned tone. This feels so great to be playing this kind of music with this amplifier. So yeah, today we're talking about this. This is a 7-string guitar, and not only are we talking about 7-string guitars, but we're talking about how to make them sound good with analog gear. Cause there's a lot of stuff just going on in the guitar world nowadays, right? So there are so many guitar manufacturers, there are so many amplifier manufacturers, so many manufacturers for digital stuff. So it can kind of be overwhelming, really, to to get started with basically to get started with finding a good tone, right? And whilst there are many options out there, there's kind of this thing happening nowadays, which is that a lot of younger people, they kind of know what amplifiers are. They have used one, maybe practicing amps and stuff like that, because it's very easy to begin with. But then they're going more into the digital world, which is obviously a choice you can make. However, let me tell you the truth, which is that all the digital amplifiers have been modeled after analog amplifiers, and this is kind of the paradox thing that we're living, right? So whilst many people prefer, mainly for comfort, digital solutions for kind of modern tones, low-tuned tones, right? These digital solutions are based on real amplifiers. There are a couple of amplifiers I have here in the studio, but the main machine I used is this one. So let me give you a little close-up to what I'm using right now. This is my beloved Amp 1 Iridium Edition, and it's in very Emmanuel-like settings. So we're in the modern channel, first of all, right? This is the channel which I really much like in terms of the voicing. Right? If we compare it to another channel, to the classic channel, for example. Let's go back to modern. Right, you can hear that it kind of has a very distinct voicing, with a certain cut on the mids, which is something that I consider quite modern. So many modern guitar metal tones have this kind of voicing, right? That's why I tend to use this one. And yeah, for the rest of the settings, we are gain on somewhere between 7 and 8. Boost is always on, mostly when I use this machine. Boost is always on. We'll talk about that later. We have bass close to 5, we have mids close to 3, and treble is somewhere between 4 and 5. This is how it sounds again. So yeah, this is kind of my go-to tone if I want just play around with it, noodling a little bit, playing some riffs. So this is how it sounds. Now, let's not leave it at that, because I really want to deep dive with you into the world of these kind of modern tones, tell you exactly what I did in the song in the beginning, and just let you a little bit, just to let you know a little bit about how to achieve these kind of tones. So first of all, right, something that is very essential for getting a good low tune tone is to control the low end, right? Because as we're tuning the guitar down, or as we're adding another string which is lower than what we have on a 6th string, right, we are entering lower frequency register. So this kind of means that we're adding something to what we're used to when we're playing a standard tuned 6th string guitar. And this is kind of where things change a little bit, right? I'd say that somewhere below the D, the drop D kind of tuning, right? If you're getting into that drop C sharp, drop C, it starts there, right? It may be that the guitar tone that you're used to and that you love when you're playing just with standard tuning, E flat or whatever, it doesn't really work on that, right? It can be that it can kind of sound muddy, less defined, and just not pleasing at all. And this is because, right, we're just entering a new frequency register. So I prepared something here, right? And this is, this may be a little bit nerdy, but we're really deep diving into it. That's what I said, and that's what we do. So I have a new view for you. This is my DAW welcome on my computer, and I've prepared a couple of presets here. More about that later, but we'll take a look at the differences between a 6th string kind of low chugging riff and a 7th string kind of low chugging riff. So this is an EQ, and it does have an analyzer, right? So this means that as audio is going through, this analyzes the frequency range that we're covering. So let's play the exact same riff twice, but the first time I'm just using I'm just playing it in the key of E, which is the lowest key you can achieve on a standard tuned 6th string guitar. And then the second time I do it, I play it on the 7th string, including the 7th string, so I'm playing it in B then, which is a 5th lower than E, right? And this is where we'll certainly see a difference on the EQ. So let me prove it to you. Just a very boring, nice riff. Let's play something very chuggy with pinch harmonic stuff like that. Something like that. Let me record that very quick and see how it sounds. We don't need the click. Great. That was a riff which I already don't remember right now, played in E standard. So let me try and play a very similar thing now in B. So using the 7th string, getting a 5th lower. Yeah, so I forgot the ending, but it doesn't really matter. So I have this EQ on both of these channels, right? And the very important thing about this is that I'm using the exact same impulse response, right? So this is a diesel cab, diesel with vintage 30s. It's voiced to be more modern. That's what it says. And we're going to the first channel again, and we'll see the same thing, right? It's the exact same impulse response. So no one can tell me that the pickup is different, the guitar is different, the amp is different, whatever. It's all the same settings, just played in different key with a different string. So let's take a look first at the standard tune version. See what the EQ does here. So here we go. Right, so this is how it looks. So it goes up to like, somewhere like 20 or something when we're looking at the left scale. Yeah, so this is how it looks. Now let's go and do the same thing with the 7-string riff and see how that looks. Right, so it's not the exact same riff, but very, very close. So we can see that certainly, everything down here somewhere, around 200 hertz is where there's a lot of action going on with the 7-string, while there's way less with the 6-string, right? Let me mute both of those, and I think they should still work. So this is, let's rename this. This is Metalcore 7, and the other one is just Metalcore. So let's compare them side by side. Let's see if it still works when they're muted. Yeah, it still works, right? So see on the 7-string, right, we have some activity down here, somewhere between 100 and 200 hertz, right? There are quite some peaks going on here, whilst we don't have that happening with the 6-string re. Let's go back here. Also, these peaks, they are a little more intense, for example, so around 200 hertz, what's that, 180 or something, right? We have something going on with the 6-string, but the peak is just way higher with the 7-string. So this is the issue we are facing, and this is kind of the reason why sometimes it can be very, very unpleasing, to play with a tone that you're used to, and then taking it to, lower tuned guitars, 7-string guitars, things like that, right? So that's the factual reason that we've just seen. By the way, guys, let me quickly take a look at the chat, because I know that you guys like to talk from time to time. Cool. People are appreciating the metal stream. There are some requests for Thomas. Great, guys. So if you if you want to know something, if you have a question that is related to the topic that we're covering today, feel free to just leave a comment there, and I'm sure that we can make things happen, talk about that. All right, let's get back to business. So we've just seen that it's quite a difference, right, in terms of the lower register that is covered when we're doing some 7-string action, and this means that we somehow have to get this into control. And the first thing I do is take a look at the amp settings that you're having. So usually, as guitar players, I mean, it certainly doesn't count for everyone, but it counts for me. I tend to be quite lazy, so if I like a tone, I usually leave it as it is, and do lots of silly things with it, like recording, like playing live and stuff like that. And this is also because I'm also a sound engineer, so usually, there are many options to fix things in post if the input signal is kind of neutral. Let's not say fix, but to shape things in post. That's why, in a lot of cases, you will never see me having a very extreme amp setting unless it really needs to, it needs to be when I need to, try to sound like someone else. For example, for the History of Metal thing, we did the Dimebag tone, right? It did have 0 mids. So usually I don't do these things that, really shape the tone extreme in the first place. But what I do is I try to keep a quite neutral amp setting. As you can see here, right, we have bass on 5, we have mids around 3, and then we have treble between 4 and 5. So mid cut, it's just how metal works. This is where I act the most extreme, even though this is not, not too extreme. However, it's quite a neutral amp setting. So when I'm playing through that, I just heard it, but let's listen to this again. Right, this is how it sounds. So it does sound quite modern. It does have the mid cut, but still, there's a lot of material coming over to shape it. Now, if I turn the mids in again, right, let's see how that sounds. So also let's put them close to 5. Right, you can hear that it just doesn't go with this style of Chuck playing. I mean, I don't really enjoy that. I think the amp is a little too loud, so let me tune that down. to not destroy your ears. Turn up my speakers then, because I want to hear what I play. Right, so this would not be considered to be a modern metal tone, right? So it's not defined. The mids, they add too much juice to it, right? So not very pleasant to play with this kind of palm-muted shock power chord kind of playing style. So this kind of means that, you know, we're in the good place. We're in a very good place, turning down the mids in the first place, right? This is just something that feels very, very pleasant. Right? It just feels right. So this kind of goes against what I said in the beginning. Keep the settings neutral to be able to shape it afterwards. But, you know, in some cases we just can be sure that we'll never ever need this amount of mids. So, you know, somewhere around 3 works quite good for me. Then, you know, this is our amp sounds. Right, so it's a good tone. Kind of works better. Now, I keep telling you that the boost is always on when I'm playing the amp one, and this is, you know, certainly it is on 90% of the times, because the boost, and that's a very great function on this device, it kind of replaces what many metal guitar players usually do, which is, you know, boosting with a tube screamer or a Boss OD1, something like that. I mean, even see some of these guys in my background. You know, here's my Ibanez tube screamer, and this is a Boss distortion pedal. You know, things like that. Usually, you put in front to be able to boost, to kind of boost a little bit. And this is again kind of a paradox thing, because we're killing the mids in the first place, and now we're adding them again with a tube screamer. And this is something, you know, that doesn't make sense in the first place. However, it does work quite well. So a professional tone that has been recorded professionally, you know, dialed in professionally, then mixed and mastered professionally, you know, if it would be possible to get the perfect tone right at the beginning, right, we wouldn't have all these components that are used while it's doing a professional tone, which is, you know, everything that the signal goes through influences the sound, the final sound. So therefore, while it may seem paradox to sometimes cut a certain frequency out and then add it again later, or do it the other way around, keep a certain frequency just to cut it out later, this may seem paradox. However, this is just how it works. Having these different stages of tone shaping, right, just adds another layer, and it reacts differently all the time. So think about cooking a meal, right? There are certain meals that you can just, you know, do very quick, and they're great and good. But usually, if you're cooking, if you're working with a professional chef, you know, what they would do is they take their time, they season, you know, the meat, the vegetables, whatever, in the first place slightly. They start cooking it. After an hour or so, they add seasoning. You know, they start to stir it. They cook it for another hour. Again, adding seasoning. You know, when it's served, there may be something served on top. So it's kind of very similar to that. If it would make no difference, right, to add all of the seasoning in the beginning, right, they would do it very quick, very fast, and everyone would be good. But it's not working like that in most situations in life, right? So there are many components that shape a tone, starting from the guitar cap, amp, you know, pedals, EQing, post-production, whatever. All these things need to be considered if you want to dial it into good tone. We're still going the easy way, but I just wanted to, you know, explain you a little bit of what can happen on a later stage. Alright, so we are now with this tone. Mids are around 3. This is a very good setting that I'd recommend you to try if you want to get modern metal tones with the Amp 1 Iridium. Here's a proof, sounds good right away. Now, gain. And this is a thing that we're diving into right now. So when you've seen the video that I showed you in the beginning, you've seen that the gain settings were kind of moderate, so I never ever had it on 10, right? It was mostly somewhere between 6 or 7. Still have some headroom, so we could still add some gain, and it may feel nice, right? So when I'm just, you know, going here and chugging a little bit, It sounds good. If I now add some gain, so let's put it on 9. May sound even better to some of you. Let's go to 10. Right? It may sound even better to some of you, but here's the thing. Now, it depends on what you're trying to achieve. Are you just going for a pleasing tone that just, feels good when you're playing, when you're noodling, or do you want to create something? Because that is a very important thing that we have to take into account. So we'll change again to this window here. Remember, we did do our guitar 7 versus 6 string riff comparison in terms of frequencies here, and we've just then noticed that lower strings just add lower frequencies. Now let's get to gain. If I was now recording something, right, this is usually where you're not just going with one guitar track, but this is usually where we do at least double tracking. Something like many producers do, even quad tracking. We have amp blending, things like that happening when you're recording. Amp blending, great topic. We'll talk about that in one of the future episodes, by the way. But let's now get into this. So I'm here on 120 BPM, which is kind of low. So let's get to 140 and play something just nice and groovy. Let me quickly try and get a feel for this. I'll play something like that, 140. So I'm recording this. Remember it this time. So this is how it sounds recorded. You get an idea, it's gain on 7, right? If I would now do the same thing with gain on 10, it would sound a little more pleasing. Maybe in the first place we did that before. So let's do what we would do in the studio. Let's get a second track sharp here, and let's try and play the same thing, which again I don't remember. we'll get to. There we go. Don't remember it, but I will. Don't remember that, but screw it. We don't need it. So we got the first couple of moments here captured, right? And this is how it would sound then if we have one guitar pen to the left and one guitar pen to the right. Right? So in the first place, we just had the guitar, one guitar just playing without anything else, right? It felt like a little more gain could help it, to have a little more sustain, to make things just sound a little more brutal. Now, we see that once we start adding a second guitar track and penning it left and right, that's what you usually do, right? There's not really much of a need for an extra layer of gain. Now let's add more gain and see how that sounds in comparison. So I now turn on the boost. It's still gain on 7, but just with boost. So let me quickly record a couple of tracks here. Do need the click. Just the first part of the riff. Let's now record a second track here. Mistake. That was it. And now let's record a final take with gain on 10 and boost on as well. So everything we could add from the amp one. And let's see how that sounds. Let's Right, that was it on the right. Let's go for one track on the left. As you can see, it's all live. Nothing has been prepared. We're doing the real thing. Great. So we have gain on 7 here, gain on 7 no boost. We have gain on 7 with boost, and we have gain on 10 with boost. So let's compare those side by side. So let me know in the chat. Be honest, which version you prefer? Gain on 7. No boost, gain on 7 with boost, gain on 10 with boost. We have these 3 gain stages. Let me know in the chat what you prefer. I'm not going to tell you my opinion yet because I'm very keen on seeing what you think. So that's the second thing we need to keep in mind when we're diving into such a tone. What are we going to use it for? Are we just being in our bedroom jamming? Because this is usually when we want to have lots of gain just to feel comfortable, right? Just to have fun, gain and reverb and things like that may cover a little bit of our flaws, just make us comfortable playing and these things. When we're recording, this is a whole different story, right? So that can very much influence the way you should dial into a tone, the purpose that you're using it for. So let's get back to this. Let's see what's going on in the chat. So cool. There some people appreciating the amp one, which is certainly I'm with you. Really love this thing. There are people greeting us. Hey man, how's it going? And then we have a couple of comments that are about the thing we just did. So we got gain on 7 with boost. Oh wow, okay. We're starting a thing which is good, guys. I count on you. I want to talk to you today. Okay, this is a day where we're interacting with each other, and we'll do funny things. We still have quite some time to go, and it's gonna be more fun if you guys are with me. So you want to hear them again? Let's go for it. So gain on 7, no boost. Oh, I quickly change the camera. Great, gain on 7, no boost. Gain on 7 boost. Gain on 10 boost. To be honest, none of them sounds bad. This is just too good of an amplifier to make it sound bad that easy. But yeah, certainly there are more preferable options and less preferable options for me. All right, let's take a look again. So I hope that you guys did have some time to consider your decision. Make sure to cast your vote into the chat. We got a suggestion, all of them together. Okay, let's try that. I'm actually very interested in seeing how that sounds. So we're not gonna get a good tone of this, just for the reason that we'll have some phase issues if we have the same thing going on 3 times. But nonetheless, let's try and see how this would sound. Got 3 on the left, 3 on the right. Are you ready? This is all settings at once. Wow, this is blowing up my speakers. Let's go. Wow, this was surprisingly good. I was talking about quad recording a minute ago, so that's usually what we did also on the Majesty albums, quad recording, and there are reasons for it. Great, so we've also tried this one. So again, we are, we need to take into consideration what we are going to do with the tone in the end. And A lot of gain can be fun, but as you can hear, just a fun thing didn't sound bad at all. But if you were to take it to the next step of the production, would then be editing, which would then be mixing, right? Too much gain can also be something that can, just damage the overall guitar sound. It may make it sound fat in the first place, but in the end, you want to have a fat and tight guitar sound that fits into the mix well. It doesn't get in your way, and gain is something that you have to be careful with when you're recording, because it's easy to add some gain. You can now throw in a distortion plugin or whatever, and this would make things better. Gain from the amplifier is irreplaceable, so it needs to be dialed in good, ideally, but adding gain is something that is very much possible, while taking gain out is a little more complicated. Alright, we got amp settings, we have gain staging. Let's talk a little bit about the way that we're shaping the sound in post. So we're changing again to my desktop view, taking you with into my DAW, and these were the tones that we've just recorded. So let's leave them here for a minute. Still, while these tones sound very good for amplifier, they're still kind of raw. Good sounding tone. This is my favorite, by the way. Gain on 7 amp boost. Now, usually, right, you wouldn't send this off to. You wouldn't export this and be like, this is the final version of everything, right? You do some things in post. I'm not gonna do a full mixing tutorial right now, right? So that's a whole different topic. But I want to give you like a 5 or 10 minute impression of what would happen to a guitar tone, what it would go through. So usually what mixing engineers do is they put all of this onto a bus, right? So we're just making that up very quick. Bus 1. Send the second guitar here as well. Boom. Right? So we have 2 guitars now on 1 channel. And then things start. Usually what comes first will be something like a compressor, right? So let's just go very quickly for an LA2 classic compressor. This is just to make sure that the signal is not too dynamic, especially in metal. Too much dynamics can kind of be counterproductive, really. So you want to have it tight. You want the dynamics to be at a certain level, and you can very much easily achieve that. Yeah, so let's take it on a loop. This sounds quite nice. So we're controlling the peaks and everything a little bit. That's the first thing you would do. Then, what some people do is they add something like a tape recorder to make it sound a little more analog. We could do that as well, but let's just skip this one because we're not want to deep dive too much into it. It takes some time to dive that in. So usually now what would come now is EQing, right? So there's so as you can see, this is I've got quite a good collection of plugins here. Now let's take something like the Vitamin EQ, which is kind of EQ compression boost thing in one, and I do have obviously a couple of settings that I like to use. So this one usually is kind of good when I'm working with IRs. It takes out a little bit of the digital hit. Just makes things, opens it up a little bit, makes it slightly sharper without adding too much, like unpleasant sharpness. And then, let's do a round or two of EQing. So, Fab filter is the EQ that everyone seems to love nowadays. So first thing with an equalizer like this is you would certainly do something like a low cut, which would look like this then, guitar. Somewhere here, right? We would do a high cut usually. Let's go for that. like dark guitar tones, and see what we just did there. This wasn't lots of effort. So how it sound out of the amp. How it sounds with a couple of plugins. Way different, right? So there's a lot of stuff going on. So you now get out a couple of resonances, but it takes just ages to do that. So usually, what I would do is just also again cut a little bit of the. Something like that, right? And that's all we're going to do right now because we don't want to overdo it. But always be aware that if your guitar tone, the way it goes in, it never goes out like that, the same way. And if this was now a really professional mixing kind of situation, similar to what I did in the intro, which we'll talk about in a second, right? You'd see that there's a lot of more stuff going on. So this is just the very raw mixing session. If it was my, if it was really my my real setup, you'd have double the amount of plugins here, a couple of more EQs. I'd have a multi-band compressor, right, to get rid of the kind of the palm muted disturbances, things like that. And then this will be part of a whole mix. So we would have a bass guitar going on. So right, we would do something like parallel compression, to make sure that things don't get in the way. Then you have a master bass, right, on the master. Everything that is happening on the master influences every single track on your track. So there's so many more things to deal with. Right, so again, this was the raw guitar tone. And this is the slightly processed guitar tone. Right, so this sound way different already. And I promise you, if this was a really professional production, there would be a lot of more stuff going on. All right, let us go and watch another video which I prepared. So you've seen a song at the beginning. For those guys who just tuned in, a moment ago, welcome to the stream. So we had a video in the beginning where I was just doing something like presenting different sounds I got with the M1 Iridium, and I made up a thing where we'll have a comparison between just the guitar and then the full arrangement. And this is the next step, right? I just showed you how a slightly mixed guitar could sound like. Now, I said that, the mastering and all of that does influence the guitar as well. So what we'll hear now is the full arrangement for a couple of seconds, and then we'll have the guitar track from the original mix in the arrangement. So with all the mixing, with all the mastering, this is how it sounds. So let's take a look at the demo, which I call metalcore, because it's kind of metalcore style music. Let's go for it. See you in a second. That was it. Some, metalcore kind of, you know, action going on here with the 7th string. This was even lower, so I'm right now in B standard. Oh, sorry, I need to turn this on again. I'm right now in B standard. This is how it sounds. Let's take it back to the center because we're not doing the mixing thing anymore. This is kind of the tone I use for that, the raw tone, the tone I was working with until this very moment, right? So it had this, you know, diesel. It had this diesel impulse response going on, happening there, and yeah, the raw tone, we've worked with that a lot. So you know, it did sound very different when I did the slight mixing thing here right now live, right a moment back, and then it also did sound very different when we heard it solo in the fully produced track. And this is because many things happen again, right? So the master bus is active there. Which means that, you know, a lot of stuff is happening there. I usually don't like adding highs too much to my guitar tones. I just had this very aggressive high cut, so I generally tend to like darker guitar tones. However, in the mastering process, usually there's a lot of high frequencies being added there. So why would I need to add highs in the beginning when I got them in the mastering channel? If I know that, and if I'm aware about that, right, this kind of influences the way you work with these things, right? So it did sound very, very different there. However, the core material is this. And this is an amp 1 straight into an interface with just one IR there, having the mids on 3 and then the rest somewhere at 5. Gain, you know, preferably if you're playing to record, somewhere between 7 and 8. If you're just playing along here, then you can crank up the gain. This is the core material we have. So we've been talking about this tone a lot. Let's get to another tone, right? So I'm leaving you again now for just a minute, and we're getting back to one of these demos on the same style. So a little bit of the full arrangement and a little bit of just the guitar. This time we're going to the Djent demo. So let's Djent a little bit. Hey guys, super sorry. Just seen a comment that we don't have sound. That was one thing I did do wrong, but it should work now. Super sorry. We'll be back now with sound on the very same clip here. Right, so this should have been a little bit better, right, if you can actually hear me playing. So again, this was the Djent demo, and again, this is in drop A. So you've seen what you've seen on the screen there may sound a little bit unrealistic to some of you. Let's go to the side cam and see what happens. So I do have gain somewhere around 4 only for that demo, right? Bass, somewhere around 5, mid somewhere here 3 and 4, closer to 4, and then treble again on 4. Right? It does sound a little bit different now when I'm playing it raw, obviously, and I do use another IR as well. This is where the differences in sound come from. So this is the Djent preset, and it does have again a diesel V30, but it's the same cab, but it's been slightly tweaked to sound a little different. And this is how it sounds. This is such a cool move, isn't it? Really like to play that. All right, so that is how that sounds. And again, this is even a better example for what I've been trying to tell you with the first setting we had for the metalcore kind of stuff, right? It's not sounding massive right now. There's not much gain on there, considering this to be a Djent tone. But the thing is, what am I doing with it? It is super percussive, right? I'm not only playing, like chunk notes all the time, but I do have these percussive. Right? So this is something that needs to be taken into account when you're doing the tone. So let me crank up the gain. Let's see. Let's take gain to 10. Oh, this doesn't sound good at all, I'd say. It just messes everything up, right? So in these situations, even if you're playing a genre like Djent, which is super heavy, super modern, requires all the modern tone knowledge, right? It doesn't make sense to crank up the gain. You're double tracking it maybe, or you're mixing it, you're producing it, and you need to have a good tone, to dial into that, to make it suitable for all the things to come. And again, you can talk about slightly increasing the gain. I'm not against that. So if would be around 6 or so. I'm just. It has been a couple of days that I played Djent, so it's not my go-to genre, but it's just so joyful. I mean, this just works for all these things that require precision. I mean, it makes it slightly harder to play, to get things down. But again, you can hear all the notes. You can, even if it's very low, you can hear all the notes, right? You can do the double recording still. Everything's sounding super tight. Then we had riffs like what was it? That was a riff, right? Right, so Djent has recognized the rhythm. So things like Meshuggah play, sounding very, very good with this kind of tone, right? It does have a little more mids than the other tone I was presenting, because this is just an aesthetic thing. I think mids, in Djent, as everything is so percussive, they have more room than a metalcore, for example. Yeah, but still kind of reduced on mids. All right, that was this tone, right? Let's get to another tone, and let's try to use another channel, because not only the modern tone can be good for producing modern tones, and not only the modern channel can be good for producing modern tones, there are more channels on this device which we can use indeed to get some modern tones out of it. So let's take a look what we can do with the classic channel. See you in a second. And again, I had the wrong setting on this video. Super sorry, but we'll get this fixed in just a moment. So here we go again in that demo, which I call like groove metal. It's kind of in the style of, you know, bands like Five Finger Death Punch, arguably there may be, you know, some Lamb of God-ish things in there. You know, this is metal that certainly has a very modern style of playing. They use very modern techniques, but they sometimes do have a little different tones from all the kind of core stuff. And that's why I use the classic channel on this device, which is usually very good to emulate something like a rectifier, dual rectifier-ish kind of tone. Yeah, so let's take a look at these settings. Here we go into the sidecan, and well, again, let's put gain now to 7 or something. Bass on 5 sounds good. We can put it up even more, 6 for now. Let's take mid somewhere between 3 and 4 is good. Treble on 4 is good. Let's see how that sounds. So it sounds a little different from what we have done before. Now, I'm always talking about taking out the mids, right? So I'm taking out, I'm kind of the less is more mids guy. So I wanted to give you a tone that does have some mids, right? To also prove you it can sometimes work. So this is not a tone, you know, that would work on some of the other things I've played. Like these are, for example, if we had these kind of faster licks with string skipping, where we're, you know, playing different octaves, as in the Djent demo, like, right? You'll immediately hear that if I now switch back to the modern channel, right? For this kind of stuff, it usually works better if your tone is not that juicy, but if it is reduced in the mid territory. However, this tone, you know, was aimed to sound just a little fatter, right? Not as precise, but just, you know, a little more of everything, like a chubby tone, a curvy tone, however you want to call it, right? So this tone has all the calories, and it doesn't really cut. And yeah, the result is that, you know, this tone, while it may sound not that precise, it just sounds very good for this kind of style, right? So big chords, palm muting all the time. Playing mainly in the lower register, not too many jumps at the time, right? Nothing that can be too overwhelming in terms of playing. You can still play fast, as the riff I had. You know, things like that. I'm actually still in A, so let's get back to standard B. Alright, play the same riff, though. Remember it. Well, so Again, this is not exactly slow. This is still some quite fast playing going on there. However, I'm just playing 3 notes. Right? It's heavily palm muted. So this is not the time to shine for the notes. This is not if I will play any different notes. Something like that, right? Different notes still kind of gives you the same vibe. This is too high now. But you're getting the point, right? It's more about this kind of chuggy, palm muted, fast element being in there. And this is really much where a tone like this comes handy. It has a little bit more of everything, more bass, more mids, slightly more highs. Those don't really come too much into play, as the bass is quite high here, but just a little more of everything. And this is basically how the tone sounds. Again, it's gonna get a little sharper, a little tighter when you do the post-production thing that I just did, and this is also the case with the demo we've seen. But this can work very, very well as your bass tone for, well, not bass guitar tone, but basic tone for a style like that, right? Let's play a couple of more riffs with this tone. Very good for this kind of style, especially with a tone like that. I mean, I generally love to add blues notes to metal, but this is way fun with this kind of setting as well, especially with this kind of setting, right? To also get the tritone in there. Okay. That's the classic channel tone that we went for. Alright, I got one last demo that I didn't show you yet. I'm afraid that the sound setting may be the wrong one, but I'll fix it. I'll fix it in the beginning, so maybe that you don't have the sound going on there for just a moment, but be sure that it will appear after a couple of seconds. We're now taking a look at my favorite demo of the run I did for this video, the one I prepared for this video, which I call something like prog or technical kind of metal, and you'll hear and see why in just a moment. So let's go for it. Here we go. I hope that you've heard it. So that, again, prog, technical kind of metal, I'm not too good with these genre specifications. So let me show you how this tone works. So again, we're on the modern channel. We're back on the modern channel. We do have a different IR, which I'm going to talk about in just a bit. Mids, again, slightly reduced highs, and bass somewhere at 5, right? This is what we've seen in the video. Gain, again, 7 or 6, kind of good starting point, and this is how it would sound. actually play some of the riffs of the tune, so it wasn't drop A again. No, that was wrong. Right, this kind of thing going on there. So again, this is very different. We do have now a lot of different notes and octaves covered in very little time. So a juicy tone with a little more bass, a little more mids, and a little more everything, right, wouldn't necessarily be what I was going for in this kind of situation. So again, we do have a little less mids. I mean, we can maybe add a little more highs. See, just a little bit. You know, does good. Again, the knobs on the amp one are super powerful. So if you just tweak something for a millimeter, then it can change the tone quite a lot. Yeah. Again, this kind of feels good, and yeah, this is just more suitable. Again, we have a more reduced tone, which then adds more tightness for things like covering a lot of different octaves in very little time, right? So things like these string skippings, things like that. Right? They usually work quite good with it. It can still sound quite brutal in the slow part, so I had some like that was the right note. But again, we're changing our playing style a lot in these kind of riffs. So we're going from slow and more brutal kind of breakdownish feeling to something that is again played in a higher octave, played a little faster with palm mutes, right? So it's going all over the place in terms of the guitar playing. Let me try and nail this riff. And then we had this. This is usually, so talk about that for just a minute. Usually, people think that this is the hard part in the song, but if you have these weird techniques going on, right, the part where I'm just playing these patterns, like, when you're on stage, things like that, when you're properly warmed up and stuff like that, they're usually the easier parts in your head because you can remember them so easy, and rather than the other stuff. All right, yeah, this is kind of the thing that happened there tone-wise, and then we had the kind of Meshuggah breakdown. Right? So this is just a very good overall metal tone that works for all these different things. You can argue that maybe, on, for example, the breakdown on this, you would prefer another tone and maybe a even more precise tone with even less mids for the beginning. Very fast. I need to get my fret wrap going on here, but things like that. You may argue now that for all of these individual riffs, there would be a more suitable tone. But it's always about finding a tone that would just suit the song that you're playing or the thing that you're doing right now. Because usually you're not going to change your tone too much within one kind of track. So I find this again to be a very, very good modern metal tone that just works for most of the situations, and if you have a song that just requires something else, you can add or reduce the tone even further in terms of some of these frequencies. All right, let's get back to the DAW and take a final look at what we did, make a little summary for what we've done today, and then see if you guys have more questions. So when you're still here, when you're still watching, thank you so much. I'm really appreciating every one of you watching, and it's just a pleasure, to tell you and educate you, and just have a great time with you regarding some of these great guitar topics. So if you want me to play something, to try out something, to do just a certain thing that you have in your hand, feel free to drop a comment. We also have the DAW with us today, so we can do all sorts of weird and funny things. I'm just going one last time. I'm going through all the tones that we had here. So again, this is the metalcore tone, as I call it. It does have a diesel cap with V30s as the IR of choice, and it sounds like this. Right, again, so we got bass turn up again to be like 5.5, mids around 3, treble around 4, gain about 7, and then the boost is on. That is how that sounds. Then we have the Djent tone, so we're going here, check that again, right? This one does have a diesel V30 again, but it is a voice slightly different, so it's called Proc in the preset. And for this tone, I had gain a little less, right? And then I had a little more mids, so this was kind of slightly reduced on gain and then boosted on the other things, and this is how it sounds. Something like that is what we get from this tone. Now let's go to the prog section. So on the prog section, we're still in the modern channel. We have a slightly different cap, so it is a diesel and a Mesa Boogie cap, both equipped with the V30s. And then for prog, we had gain just turned slightly up to 6. We did have mids again quite low, bass somewhere between 5 and 6, and then treble somewhere around 4. And this is how it sounded with this IR. The prog, very much fun to play. And then we got groove again, so we're going for the classic channel here in terms of impulse responses. What we're having here is Mesa G80 plus V30, and it's been voiced again quite differently. So what we did here is we did add back even more mids again. We had quite much lows based on 6 to make it sound fat. It can sound a little muddy in this case, and then again treble somewhere around 4, and this is how it does sound. This is the fatter, little more old schoolish tone. Well, it's not exactly old school, but a little more old schoolish tone that just has more of everything that this amp has to offer in terms of juicy frequencies. All right, these were the tones that we had. Now, I said that if you have any more questions, let's go for those, because we're slowly but surely getting closer to the final minutes of this live streams. So someone said he's enjoying it. That's great. We got a couple of just very friendly comments. Thanks for that. How do you get metal effect? That's it's a comment by the user Fishy Horror. So Fishy Horror, the metal effect. What do you mean by that? You know, there are very different ways to get to get a metal tone, but if you can elaborate a little further on what you mean by getting the metal effect, then I'm super happy to tell you about this. Until we got an answer from you, I'm just gonna, you know, burn a couple of more riffs and licks here, and see if there's something happening in the chat. Arguably, I actually do have a 6 string with me today. This is a 7 string guitar, but the high E string is missing. So when I was recording all the, you know, the final videos yesterday that that I've showed you in the beginning, you know, what I did there is I was shredding a little bit, and you know, sometimes strings just break. That's what happens, right? So I was restringing my guitar. I was about to restring my guitar, and a friend was over here in the studio. We were having a chat, and he said, like, leave the high E string, because that's usually the string that you use a lot when you're playing shred lead guitar. And tomorrow's topic is about modern low tuned 7 string kind of tones. So leave the high E string, just use the low strings, because that's what I want to talk about, because he knows that if I had the opportunity to, I'd shred all day. So this is kind of a little bit of self-control, right? So I can start a run, but I cannot finish it because I don't have the high E string. This is as far as it goes. Feels actually weird, but some collects some. Alright, a last run of riffs, and then I think we'll wrap it up, other than if there are some more questions. Alright guys, I think that's it for today. Super happy to, present to you once a month about the world of modern tones, of metal tones. This is what I'm very much into. This is what I like to share. I just built this beautifully new place, to be able to deliver to you an even higher quality. Thanks everyone for tuning in. I guess I'll see you next month then with another topic which we'll announce on our Instagram channel. And saying that we have this YouTube channel with a lot of stuff going on, live streams once per week and other videos from time to time, right? So if I was you, if you didn't subscribe yet, you should do that by now. Certainly leave a sub to this channel. We are active on Instagram and Facebook. So you should also check out our Instagram and Facebook page to make sure that you don't miss any announcements. We'll have some great actions, with a couple of products in stock. So we'll have a test action next month. We'll have news about things like certain special amps, like the Amp 1, the RIM Special Edition that's been coming out, and also other things in the future that I'm not going to talk about yet. But there are some cool things to happen. So thanks everyone for tuning in. I hope that you had a good time with me. I certainly had. And yeah, I guess I'd see you then in the next stream. Have a nice one. Cheers to everyone, and see you very soon.